Hey, what is up, guys? On my way to jiu-jitsu, recovering from another injury, actually. I wrecked my calf muscle the other week sparring, and had to take a week off, but I'm back on the mats today, which is good. Wanted to share with you a very cool practice principle that often gets neglected, or really rarely gets talked about or broken down properly, but we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But first of all, what I wanted to do, because it's coming up to 2 years since I've had my JHB signature bass from Warwick, and just a little update on that, because this bass has really served me well. And it's a weird thing about instruments, and I remember speaking with this to several people in the past about how when you get an instrument and you play it in, and all the oils from your hands are going into that instrument, that after an extended period of time, and it usually takes about a year, year and a half to 2 years before this transformation of the instrument takes place, where you really get your connection with the instrument solid. It's a weird thing. I'm not too sure about all the factors and how it actually works, but it definitely is a thing. And this has really happened with this bass, and I'm talking about the 5-string version. The 4-string is great too, but I don't really play that instrument. That instrument is really used as a teaching vehicle, and because many of my students play 4-string, so it's good to have a 4-string bass to demonstrate ideas to people who are playing 4. But the 5-string is my main axe, and I've always been a one bass guy. I've never been a guy who's played many different instruments. If you followed me for many years, you would know that from the very beginning. I've always just had one axe, and I never like to really keep too many basses around either. I'm not a collector at all. That whole sort of thing, it doesn't appeal to me. But, and I guess for the main reason that I really just want to play one instrument and want to get used to it, and I want that to be the true extension of my artistic expression. And to get that, you have to have an instrument that you're playing for a while. If you're like the guy who plays a P bass on Monday, and then on Tuesday has a Hofner Beetle bass, and then on Wednesday plays a jazz bass, and then on Thursday plays a Gibson Ripper, and then on Friday you play a Rickenbacker. To me, you're never going to have anything to where you can actually make that connection to, because it takes time to get to know the landscape of the instrument, and this is really important. So I wanted to just do this video to kind of come back, because a lot of people might think that my relationship with Warwick is purely as a guy who has endorsed their instruments and they're making me the bass, so I gotta sit up there and say all these weird and wonderful things about their instrument to keep in good stead with my endorsement deal, and that way, you know, they support me by sending me to NAMM and all these other things. This isn't the case with me. Again, if you follow me for a while, or people who actually know me personally know that I'm not interested in these kind of things, because the deal is, when Hans-Peter Wilfer, who is the owner of Warwick, when he approached me about this deal, and I got to tell you, I've known him for 30 odd years. I met him when he first started Warwick, and he was involved with the Bass Center in London, and they were the main distributors for Warwick for years. So Hans has been a friend of mine for a long, long time, and in 2016 he invited me to be a teacher at the Warwick Bass Camp, and that was a great experience where I taught alongside a lot of other great musicians. And it was at that camp where he said to me, what's it gonna take to get you to play Warwick basses? And I said to him very clearly, there's only one thing: you have to make a bass that I'm gonna want to play. And so we arranged after the camp was over, we arranged a couple of days for me to fly out to Marknenkirchen, Germany, to their factory and spend time with their brilliant designer, Marcus Spangler, who's also a really good friend of mine. And he is like just one of the best. I've dealt with a lot of different designers who've worked with a lot of major companies over my period, you know, of being around, all the way dating back from the early 80s. And I've worked with all these major people, and of all these different companies, I mean, Marcus Spangler is second to none. I mean, for attention to detail and understanding how to translate my ideas into that instrument. And you know, I couldn't have had a better setup or scenario than to be involved with him on this project, because he was brilliant and he just pulled out all the stops, I gotta say. And so what happened was that was the deal clincher, was that for them to get me involved with them, they had to build me an instrument that I wanted to play. I wasn't interested in them doing ads or, you know, just so I could hold up a bass that ultimately I didn't want to play. But the outcome of what happened is what it is, and everyone has seen that this is the only bass I play now. Well, it's the main bass I play. I do play my other 4-string, and I also have a jazz bass and a precision bass that's made by a company called Bass Collection, and these are really good basses too. And sometimes on sessions, you need to have a P bass. And these are, you know, Fender copies, but they're very, very good. And I've pimped them up a little bit, but they are great instruments too. And I do use those, but really only for recordings. So I do have a couple of different basses, but my main axe that I play, I would say 99% of the time, is the JHB 5-string, which is based, the body shape based on the Fortress. A lot of people look at that and they say, yeah, it's kind of a funky body shape, you know. You know, it wasn't, to be quite honest, when I saw that body shape, it wasn't aesthetically the thing that I thought was the most beautiful body shape on the planet. But I'll tell you what, from all the different body designs that Warwick does, when that is actually on your body, it feels amazing. And an interesting little story to go with that, last year at NAMM, I was invited to give a seminar at the Musicians Institute in Hollywood. And the guy who runs that bass program there, Morris Forlop, great guy, running a great program out there. He wanted to, he sat and watched the seminar, and then at the end of it, he came up to me and he said, wow, I'm more of a Fender guy, but, I'd really like to just try out your bass because it sounded amazing on the seminar that you did. And so he put it on, and the first thing that he said was, he goes, oh, I get it. You've got a 32-inch scale. And I said, no, it's a 34-inch scale. And he then said, wow, this is insane. It's not only is this one of the most comfortable 5 strings that I've played, to have the complete and utter freedom and flexibility to reach that low C on the B string, the first fret of the B string. He said it is extremely light. And there's a lot of people that look at me in videos with that bass, and some comments that I've had is like, wow, it's like big and bulky and all that hardware, it's got to be like super heavy. But it is a lot lighter than the Federa that I was playing before, and we really went for lightness. It's got a swamp ash body on it, and Warwick have the most incredible supply of aged woods in their factory. I've never seen anything like it. It's like 3 warehouses full, and some of the wood in there has been aging for like 20-25 years. So they pulled out all stops for this instrument. Piece of swamp ash I had was just amazing. It was so light, and then it's got a maple top on the bass, which is beautiful, like a triple A or quadruple A flame maple top. But most people, when they have basses made, a lot of the builders put very thick top layers of wood on their basses. And one of the things I learned about years ago from Michael Tobias was that when you put a thick top layer on the bass, it takes away from the tonal quality of the wood that's in back of it. So if the main piece of wood is swamp ash, and then you put a flame maple top that's too thick on it, it will impinge the qualities of the swamp ash. So I asked Marcus to put the thinnest veneer top that he possibly could on there. And I remember when I first said that to him, and he said, hey, don't worry, we can do you a thicker top piece. There's no problem with the wood. But it was like, no, because I want that sound of the swamp ash, which is very, which for me, to my ears, really enhances the low mids of the instrument and gives you a very buttery sound. And I really love that sound. I prefer it to anything else. The swamp ash is just amazing. And so that's kind of how we did that thing. So the bass as a whole is just insane in the way that it sounds, the way that it's put together. So what I wanted to do is share with you some different clips of me playing on it, just to kind of remind you of the different kind of qualities that you can get out of this bass. So there's various clips that I've done here where I've got different pickup configurations. One where I'm more biased to the front pickup, which has more of a P bass type sound. Doesn't sound like a P bass, but it's more along those lines. And one where I'm using my Elio Martina bass mute, which is, to me, one of my favorite things. I don't use it much. I probably use it all in all about maybe 5% of my overall playing, but it just comes in handy when you need that 5%. Sometimes you just want that dampened sound, and what I always wanted to have is something like that. I had kind of envisaged that same thing years ago, but no one had ever come out with anything like that. And there's some other companies that have things that you just kind of stick on and pull off, you know. And I've tried several of those, and they don't work, or for me, they don't sound good. The Elio Martina one is brilliant because it's a lever mechanism that levers into the side of the strings, and you have these small little sponges, little spongy rubber things that are attached to what levers into the actual string to dampen it, but it dampens it from the side. And then you can adjust the intensity of the dampening on every individual string, which is key. That's very key, because the thing is that if you have too much dampening by any kind of mechanism like that, or even the palm of your hand will do this, depending upon the intensity that you're dropping your palm onto your strings, will affect the tuning. So I've had to fiddle around with this bass mute a little bit to get what I wanted, but it's really brilliant because you have that capability to dampen each individual string with a different intensity, and that's a necessity as far as I'm concerned. So I'm going to go ahead and feature these, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to share with you a cool practice principle. guys, so I'm sure you'll agree that my Warwick JHB signature bass sounds great, and you know, still going strong after almost 2 years of use, and loving the way that it's aging within time, you know, and you know, after you know, all getting everything of me into it over this constant playing over 2 years. So what I wanted to do today is share with you a cool principle, which I talk about in my practice book, by the way, called How to Practice with Maximum Efficiency. And this is also my best-selling book. You can get that over here. You just click on the link over here, you can get that book. But it's got a lot of great practice principles in there. And one of the things that I cover in that book is the idea of chunking down. So by now, I'm sure most people have heard that expression. You know, you want to chunk down what you do into smaller, manageable pieces. Okay, that's okay, but why? Why is it so important to do that? Well, because most people only have an attention span for focusing on what they need to be focusing on intensely for about 10 to 20 minutes max. Now, depending upon your experience, just to give you an idea, and as a teacher, I have to be careful sometimes because I've been doing this for a long time, not only with music, but also with martial arts. So to sit down and practice a long time and be focused and be able to take things in on all sorts of different levels simultaneously is actually quite easy for me to do now, but that's after nearly 40 years of doing it. So, and doing it pretty consistently, you know. So it's incredibly important to understand that. With that in mind, most people really only have short attention spans, and especially if what they're getting into is fairly new. And playing for a couple of years, or you know, let's say you've been playing maybe 5 years, but you've been studying for like 2 and trying to become quite serious about it. 2 years is not a long time. It really isn't. I mean, it's nothing in the big overview of things. So it's important to realize that, because people nowadays think 2 years is like a lifetime, you know, like in 2 years I'm going to become a monster. No, you're not. In 2 years you'll get a good start to pretty much realize that you don't know anything, and then from there, you know, you can start building upon that. So within that initial stage of your practice and your music journey, what you want to focus in on is no more than 20-minute sections in your practice. Now you can break this up across a day, so you could have 5 20-minute practice sessions across the span of a day, or 3 20-minute practice sessions, depending upon how much time you have to put in to practicing every day. That's one way to do it. But you can also do it all at once. Let's say you want to do an hour, so you do 3 20-minute slots back to back. But what you need to do is you need to have breaks between each one of those 20-minute sections. I recommend no more than 5 minutes. Get up, stretch, do some breathing exercises, grab a cup of coffee, go to the toilet, you know, get all that out of the way, and then come back fresh and start again. So here's the crucial reasons. There's 2 main reasons that this is important. One is that when you begin your practice, this is one of the most beneficial times in your practice session, is in the beginning. Okay? Why? Because you're fresh and you don't have a lot of clutter in your mind. So when you sit down and you're fresh, you're taking in much more. So usually that first 5 minutes is very beneficial. And then the second thing is that it's the end of your practice session. And the reason is because if you've allocated 10 or 20 minutes as your practice slot that you're working on, when you get to the end, you tend to have a little bit more attentiveness because you realize you're coming to an end. And in the beginning, people almost get excited about the session ending because it's demanding. If you're doing this correctly, practicing is very demanding. So when you come to the end of the session, your attentiveness goes up. It's the dip is in the middle of your practice. And there's no way that you can really get away from that. It's just the way that it is, really. So those 2 points, those main 2 focal points of where you're learning the most is in the very beginning and in the very end of your practice session. So if I practice for 1 hour a day, then that means within that hour, I only have 1 beginning and 1 end. That's it. So that gives me 2 focal points where it's maximizing the potential for learning within the time that I'm practicing. If I do 3 practice sessions, then what happens is I triple the benefit or triple the potential maximization of what I'm actually getting out of my practice time. So this is major. So because if I do 3 20-minute sessions, now I have 3 beginnings and I have 3 ends. This is a crucial thing. Nobody talks about this because many people don't know about it. A lot of people say, yeah, break it into small chunks, but that's it. You got to know why, because the beginnings and the ends are most important. So when you do that, you'll find in the early stages of your practice that you will be getting so much more out of your practice sessions. As years go by and you're really serious and you've done this sort of thing for 10 plus years in a very serious way, that's around the time when you could just sit down for 3 hours back to back, practice from beginning to end, and you still have the capability to maintain a high level of focus on many different levels. I'd like to call it like layers in Photoshop, because when you're practicing, there's so many different things that are going on. For instance, if you're practicing your arpeggios, many people just practice the patterns. I always get my students to practice the patterns, but also then through their practice, they have to verbalize the names of the notes. They have to verbalize the chord formula. So they have to name whether it's a root, whether it's a third, whether it's a fifth, whether it's a seventh. And then they also have to verbalize what the chord actually is that they're playing over. And the minute that you start doing this, you start to create these layers of understanding. And many people are going, man, I'm struggling just to work out what my right hand is doing on this thing, or what my left hand is doing. So there's many different layers of understanding when you practice. And to have maximum focus ability across all those layers takes many, many years of practice and study and trial and error. And you know, it's a hard road, but it's a road well worth traveling. Okay, so thought I'd lay that on you this time. You know, if you haven't got that book, How to Practice with Maximum Efficiency, make sure to pick that up. Also, all my other books that I have on my site. My latest book, Chord Tone Mastery, is just amazing. 400 plus pages, chock full of some of the best exercises for understanding chord tones, and straight out of the box applicability for all of these exercises into real world music. So anyway, take that on board, and I hope to catch you in the next video.